My name is Dr. Rachel Lindsey. I teach, as you said, in the Department of Theological Studies. My classes, I'm trained as a historian of religion in the United States. So, as you can imagine, that means a lot of different traditions. My own research focuses on visual and material cultures of Christianity predominantly, but then also religion is sort of a broader feature of public life. So I teach classes on sort of introduction to theology and introduction to Christianity, but then also courses more specialized in religions of the U.S., including a class I'm really excited about, which is called Arch City Religion, sort of taking that big story of religion in the U.S. and bringing it to the city of St. Louis. And as you may or may not know, St. Louis is one of the most religiously diverse cities in the American Midwest, certainly in the state of Missouri. So we get a chance to explore not only the Catholic and Protestant histories of the city, which are very important, very sort of foundational to the culture of the city, but then also sort of these new immigrant movements of the late 20th century. Hindus and Sikhs and Muslims and Buddhists are joining sort of generations of Jews and Christians, both Protestant and Catholic alike. So quite a range, I guess. I also teach a class on religion and politics in the U.S. So those are sort of my areas.
Okay, thank you. Could you please describe the interfaith community on campus, the fact that SLU is a Catholic Jesuit institution?
Yeah, what a great question. So the interfaith community on campus is fantastic. A lot of students are involved in this. There are a number of interfaith spaces on campus, from the over at the BSC to various residence halls. So there's this sort of interesting dynamic between this university's Catholic Jesuit heritage and mission on the one hand, and then its student population on the other. And it's easy sort of to cast these as being in tension. I don't think they're in tension. I think that part of the Jesuit mission is to sort of nurture these kind of interfaith conversations, right? Especially over the last several generations. In addition to sort of the Interfaith Alliance, which is probably the biggest interfaith or the most official sort of interfaith group on campus, there are different student groups who work together in different capacities. So there's a lot of interfaith conversation going on campus, and students are hosting fantastic events that sort of showcase their religious traditions to the broader student community.
Yes, and they're very informative based.
And very, very informative based, absolutely, right. This idea of sort of teaching each other about each other is one of the main benefits of interfaith conversation on campus.
So this is a 3-part question.
Okay.
So I'll answer each question separately. What are the primary principles of Hinduism?
Primary principles of Hinduism. So Hinduism is a very wide-ranging religious tradition. In fact, some people would say that it's not even a religion. I took my students over to the Hindu temple in St. Louis last spring for a visit, and we had a chance to sit down with one of the devotees there, and he was really hesitant to call Hinduism his religion. He said it's his philosophy, his way of life, right? Now that being said, in sort of the interfaith landscape of the modern United States, we tend to sort of classify religion or Hinduism as a religion, and in that case, there are different tenets to Hinduism. Many people would say that it's about living life as best you can, right? Following your duties to each other, and to the universe, to the cosmos, right, to the deities, and sort of maintaining order in the universe through relationships, right? Relationships with each other, relationships with the deities, and that those relationships are nurtured through different kinds of ritual practices. In the U.S., we have a tendency sort of to use sort of Christianity as the model for what a religion is, right? So in that case, it would be something like you read your Bible, you go to church, right? You say your prayers, which are all sort of wonderful things within the Christian tradition to do. But Hinduism doesn't really work like that, right? It's not a text-based religion. So people, do read sacred texts, but not in the way that, Christians really, and Christians read the Bible, Jews read the Torah, Muslims read the Quran. It's not that sort of model of religious practice. It tends also to be very home-based, right? So there are temples with shrines, deities, but then also shrines in homes. So it's something, that you could do in your private sort of family devotional life without necessarily having to go to the temple. Today a lot of Hindus do go to temple, but it's not exactly analogous to going to church or to synagogue or to a mosque for Friday prayers.
So you answer my second question, which are how these principles compare to Christianity and other major religions. So
Okay.
we'll go to the third part.
Okay.
So how have these Hindu principles manifested in the practice throughout the St. Louis area and in all aspects of the community? Worshippers, relationship between the worshippers, and religious centers and relationship with others?
These are really great questions. Maybe it'll help to give a little bit of background on the Hindu community in St. Louis here. So you said there's sort of a story here that intersects with histories of immigration in the U.S. So prior to the 1960s, there weren't a whole lot of Hindus in the U.S., or what we would now call Hindu, like in this tradition of Hinduism. After 1965, with some immigration reform that takes place that sort of counterbalanced some restrictive immigration in the early 20th century, that made it really difficult for people from South Asia and other parts of the world to immigrate and become naturalized in the U.S. That changes in the 1960s. So by the 1960s, you have more immigrants from South Asia, more Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists. And they're coming here for school, right? They're coming to SLU for school. They're coming to other places in the U.S. for school. And then they're staying, right? And they're putting down roots. So by the 1980s, there's an effort in St. Louis to sort of organize what had sort of developed into a Hindu community in St. Louis into an official sort of religious structure. So in 1988, they incorporate and purchase land out in West County. And this is where, if you go out to Weidman Road in West County, you'll sort of drive by a Catholic church and a mosque, and then you'll see this Hindu temple sort of rising out of the suburban landscape. So it's a part of the city in that it's, part of the city, right? It's a feature of the architecture is a feature of the city in this sense. Hindus are shopping where everyone else is shopping, right? They're working in hospitals and universities and all over the place, right? And sending their kids to school in all over the city. So they're certainly sort of part of the city of St. Louis in those senses. It's grown. So the Hindu community in St. Louis started in the late 1980s. I say started just kind of officially. We know by that point in time there were enough Hindus in the city to sort of warrant constructing a temple, which is a very involved process. It took many years to complete. It involved, bringing priests from India to St. Louis to conduct the groundbreaking and oversee the installation of the deities, sort of the Hindu gods that are living in the temple in St. Louis. And it's continued to grow. So just recently, they've expanded their plot out there. Immigrants from India, I just read this statistic recently, are the third largest population of foreign-born citizens or residents in St. Louis. So I think it goes Mexico, China, and then India. And not all Indians are Hindu. but that does sort of indicate sort of where or how much a part of the city and culture of St. Louis Hindus have become. And I think this is where you're getting at here. Very much a feature not only of sort of the built life of the city, but they host events in Tower Grove Park and Queenie Park, right? A lot of Hindu festivals are public, so they're out in the streets and in the parks, so not behind closed doors, right? Yeah. So there's an interesting way in which not only is Hinduism part of the, as I said, sort of the architectural landscape of the city, which it is, and it's very fascinating to go out there and sort of see this in West County. But then also part of the sort of lived experience of being in St. Louis. It's pretty exciting, pretty fun.
So do you have a role in the Ricci Pluralism Project?
No, that's my colleague Pauline Lee's project. I've got a different project. It's called Arch City Religion. That if you take my classes, chances are you'll at least hear about this, if not contribute to it. I started it in 2016 with my Intro to Theology students, just as a way of sort of thinking about religion outside of the classroom, right? What does it mean to study religion in the city? And if you go to that website, it's archcityreligion.org, you can see a page on Hinduism that students have done. And you can see other sort of ways of thinking about religion in the city. Again, sort of looking at religious communities, but also looking at objects and spaces that we might not immediately think of as being religion, but when we step back and sort of think about what they're doing and how they intersect with different aspects of the city's history and culture, they do sort of become part of the religion story of the city as well. Dr. Lee and I are working together on a new project that kind of brings the Matteo Ricci Pluralism Project and Arch City Religion together to think really closely about not only religion in St. Louis, although that's a big part of it, and sort of working with communities across the city to better understand how religion is part of sort of the public life of the city. But then also, thinking about what does it mean to have a digital presence in this moment, right? Both in terms of how religions are using digital media, but then also how we, as researchers and students of religion, are also using digital technologies and media to better understand this thing that we call religion. So to that extent, I'm not part of Matteo Ricci, but I think we're really excited to be working together on this new initiative.